The alarm didn't wake you. You were already awake. It's 5:47 a.m. The room is dark. Your phone says $843 in checking. Your student loan portal says $91,400. Your Bible app said you opened it last Tuesday and haven't been back. You grew up in a church that talked about money twice. Once when the offering plate came around, and once to say that the love of it is the root of all evil. Nobody ever explained the difference between loving money and managing it well. So you figured it out from the internet, from influencers, from people selling courses. And somewhere between the noise and the debt and the 5:47 a.m. ceiling, you have a question nobody has answered cleanly. Is it possible to build real wealth and keep your soul intact? 8 levels, 1 life, 3,000 years of principles tested against the system you actually live inside. The market opens in 4 minutes. You have $843 and $91,400 in debt. Your real net worth is negative $90,557. That number sits in your chest like a stone. You don't say it out loud. Not to your parents, not to the person you're dating. You act like it isn't there. That's the first mistake. Not the debt itself, the silence around it. Jesus watched a widow drop 2 small coins into the temple treasury, the smallest denomination in circulation. Wealthy people were making large, visible contributions. And he said something nobody in the financial world would say. She gave more than all of them. Not because the amount was greater, because the proportion was total. The difference between the widow and the wealthy young ruler who walked away sad wasn't the number. It was the grip. How tightly are you holding what you have? You write down the number, the real number, net worth, not checking balance. You cannot steward what you refuse to see. You build a $1,000 emergency fund before you invest a single dollar. Proverbs 21:20 said it before any personal finance guru did. The wise store up, but fools gulp theirs down. The emergency fund is not a lack of faith. It is the practice of it. You stop performing solvency. The most faithful act right now is to live honestly inside your actual number. The system rewards discretion. The kingdom rewards honesty, especially with yourself. You close the laptop. The number is still there. Now you can work with it. You have $4,200 in savings. A Roth IRA you opened once and forgot. $73,000 left in debt. Your Instagram feed is a continuous scroll of people your age who appear to be rich, free, and not at work on a Tuesday. And you are at work on a Tuesday. This is where the parable of the talents lands differently than you were taught in Sunday school. The servant who buried his talent didn't do it out of laziness. He did it out of fear. I was afraid, he says. And fear is the dominant financial emotion at this level. Fear of the wrong investment. Fear of wanting money too much. Fear of losing what little you have. So you protect it by doing nothing. The parable calls that a waste. You automate the investment before you see the paycheck, not because you're disciplined, because you're human. The automation is the decision made once that removes the daily temptation. You learn one asset class before you touch another. You stop comparing your level 2 to someone else's level 6. The servant with 2 talents didn't look at the servant with 5 and feel behind. He worked with what he had and doubled it. That's the assignment. Fear buries talent. Faithfulness multiplies it. Somewhere in the compounding, something shifts. Not the number, the posture. The borrower is slave to the lender. That's not a metaphor. That's your Tuesday morning when the loan payment clears before you've had coffee. The weight of a decision you made at 18, with money you'd never seen, for a credential whose value nobody explained clearly. You are not a victim, but you are not entirely free either. You have $23,000 saved, $51,000 left in debt. Net worth still negative, but the trajectory has reversed. Here is where the system offers you the deal: a consolidation loan, a balance transfer at 0%, a refinance that lowers your monthly payment by extending your captivity by 4 years. The discernment required here is not financial, it's spiritual. The difference between a tool that accelerates freedom and a mechanism that makes slavery more comfortable. You attack the highest interest debt first. You see each payment not as a bill, but as a ransom. You are buying your future back, piece by piece. Every milestone, you redirect the freed payment forward. You don't reset, you redirect. Freedom is not the absence of obligation. It is the reduction of claims on your future until you are the only one with a stake in it. The last payment processes on a Thursday. For the first time in years, next month's income belongs entirely to you. Your net worth just crossed 6 figures. You don't feel different. The number changed. You are the same person. That is the most important thing that happens at this level. Because this is where money stops growing your wealth and starts amplifying you. Your habits become more consequential. Your generosity more visible. Your anxiety, your control, your comparison louder.
Luke 16:10. Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. This is not a promise about getting rich. It is a description of character continuity. You will not become a different person at the top. You will become a more resourced version of who you already are today. A colleague asks for your advice. They're in debt, making decent income, spending everything. You tell them what worked, not the system, the posture. I stopped pretending the number wasn't there. You invest 20% of income now, not because you read a rule, because you've seen the compounding start to work, and you understand that time is the only asset you cannot buy back. You begin tithing with intention rather than obligation, not out of fear of a curse, but because you've discovered something that cannot be taught. Generosity breaks the grip. Every time you give freely, you are saying, I am not owned by this, and you mean it. Money does not change who you are. It reveals who you already were. The deal comes on a Wednesday. Legal, documented, professionally structured. A 34% projected return. Your portion, $80,000. The problem is what the business does. A logistics company. Efficient, growing. But the growth model requires workforce restructuring, a euphemism for replacing the people who built it with cheaper labor. Nobody asks you to think about them. The financial model doesn't include them. You sit with it for 3 days. There is a version of the story where you sign. You rationalize it the way everyone does. You just ran the numbers. The system normalizes it. The person disappears into the machine. Micah 6:8 does not disappear into the machine. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Act justly. Not think about it. Not feel bad about it later. Act. The word is kinetic. You pass on the deal. Quietly. Professionally. You move the capital into a REIT with a cleaner return profile. The REIT returns 11.2% in year 1. The logistics deal returns 31%. You don't regret it. The wealthier you become, the more abstract the consequences of your decisions. The discipline is staying concrete. Every deal has a human on the other end. Your net worth crossed $1 million on a Tuesday. Nothing else changed, but you feel the pull almost immediately. Not greed, something quieter. The pull toward protection, secrecy, toward an enoughness that is always slightly further away than your current number. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. The agricultural metaphor is precise. A farmer who withholds seed doesn't protect the harvest, he destroys the next one. You establish giving as a structural line item, not a response to a compelling story,
A budgeted, decided advance commitment. You are not waiting to feel generous. You have decided to be generous and scheduled it accordingly. You fund things you'll never be thanked for publicly. A scholarship with no naming rights, a family at your church, a nonprofit in a country you'll likely never visit. And something surprising happens. The money stops owning you. Not because you have less, you have more. But generosity, practiced consistently, is the most effective tool ever invented for breaking the psychological grip of wealth. The generous person is the freest person in the room, not because they have the least, because they are held by it the least. Your financial advisor recommends you slow down your giving. You thank him. You continue. The calls come before the market opens now. Boards, organizations, rooms where your voice moves decisions. Deuteronomy 8 is a warning, not a comfort. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands produce this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Moses says this to the Israelites just before they enter the Promised Land. The vineyards already planted, the wells already dug. The most dangerous moment in any accumulation story is not the struggle, it is the arrival. When the origin story fades and the achievement feels entirely self-authored. You did work for this, but the capacity, the timing, the mentors, the markets, those were not you. So you build differently, not just for return. A vocational center in a neighborhood capital has written off. An affordable housing project with margins too thin for anyone else. Investments that don't show up in AUM, but show up in lives. Influence borrowed from God is influence held in trust. The question is not what you can build. It is what you are building for.
A boardroom in Geneva. 4 people, no agenda, no presentation. You speak for 6 minutes. The room listens. Then you stop, and the room moves. This moment looks identical to the final level of every financial power narrative ever written. The inside is completely different. The person who optimized only for accumulation reaches this room and finds it cold. Access to everything. Almost no one to tell. That is not an accident. That is the fruit of decades of decisions that rationalized the cost. You are in the same room. The interior is not the same. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. The Hebrew word, nahalah, means not just property, identity, the transmission of who you are across generations. The inheritance that matters is not the portfolio. It is the framework your grandchildren will use when their own crossroads deal arrives on a Wednesday. Legacy is whether the person who reads the scripture you underlined understands from the margin notes alone what you believed money was for. You think about a conversation at the very beginning. A mentor, nothing to sell, who looked at your $843 and your $914,000 in debt and said simply, I've seen this work. Not the formula, the posture. You have to decide what the money is for before you have any. You didn't understand it then. You do now. You begin writing a letter. A glass tower, a city that never stops moving. 5:47 a.m. A 23-year-old opens a terminal for the very first time. Badge says analyst, first year. $843 in checking. $91,400 in loans. A question nobody has answered cleanly. He doesn't know yet what the system actually rewards. Somewhere, someone does. And they built something different. Not a different system. The same markets, the same compounding math that has worked since the parable of the talents. But a different posture inside it. A different answer to the question beneath every financial decision anyone ever makes. What is the money for? The terminal blinks. The market opens. The principles are 3,000 years old. They still work on a Tuesday.